Welcome to another episode of the Eternal Athletes podcast. Ryan and Erin Klein here. Got my beautiful bride by my side. We are here to empower athletes to glorify Christ with their game and pursue a life with Him for eternity. So we have a super special guest on with us today. He is very, very well known in the state of Ohio. He's had over 300 athletes, per year that he is, a speed and agility performance coach for. So he brings an awesome perspective, both as a player back when he was, playing some sports and as an athlete, now to coaching over 300 athletes a year. He's helped over, 75 athletes get to the collegiate level. And then kind of a cool thing too, this guy is so good and he knows his stuff so good that people come from over an hour or two away sometimes for different training sessions for him all over Ohio. So he does some great stuff and he can't wait to talk about Jesus and sports with us on the Eternal Athletes podcast. So everyone, welcome from No Excuse Nation, Charlie Donaldson. Donaldich. I messed it up.
Even tracked it.
No, it's funny because everybody either calls me Charlie, obviously, but most of the kids just called me Coach D. So for the longest time, my last name has been a single letter just because, like we said earlier, phonetically, the Croatian last name is nothing it's not pronounced how it looks. So
it's
D is fine.
Charlie Donaldich.
Coach D.
Got my mulligan.
We got Coach D.
Coach
you get
D.
one mulligan.
Coach D on the podcast from No Excuse Nation. Welcome.
Which is the coolest name.
Appreciate it.
Yep.
Yes, love it. Welcome. We're excited to have you. We're excited to dive in. I think you'll bring a unique perspective of being an athlete yourself, your faith journey, and then also how you kind of combine those to lead a lot of I was gonna say a whole generation, like how you lead a lot of kids, on their sports career. And I know sometimes we're in positions where we can't openly talk about our faith necessarily all the time, but the fact that you can do that through your actions, through coaching. So I'm excited to dive into that. So
for sure.
So let's. I always like to start from the beginning, just because I feel like we've had so many guests that have had different experiences and different backgrounds. So I always like to start off just kind of knowing where the intersection between faith and sports happened for you. If that's something that was just instilled in you from the time that you were growing up, that you always had a relationship with Christ, you always loved sports. At what point did those kind of blend together for you?
So it was very, very organic for me. I'll be completely transparent and say that I grew up very privileged. I grew in an upper middle class neighborhood, great family, working structure, parents, the white picket fence dog, the whole nine. And I went to a Catholic school from the time I was in kindergarten. So, naturally I kind of gravitated to sports like most kids at some age or any age, do, fell in love with them. So my parochial education coupled with sports was kind of this organic blend, like I said, from the very beginning. My parents were very in shape people and always promoted healthy eating and working out. Not that they were fitness freaks by any means, but it was the constant variables of eating right, training hard, stick-to-itiveness, all those characteristics and disciplines that they try to instill for me, not just with sports, but with school kind of stuck with me. So that natural gravitation towards doing things the right way kind of led me into sports. And it was kind of an easy transition just because what was supported in my school and what was supported with my coaches was also supported at home. So kind of those core values were instilled in me in a very young age at school. So naturally, I kind of became a very coachable athlete, I would like to think. Some of my former coaches might not agree, but so that's kind of how the intersection happened. It was very natural transition, and kind of looking back on it, it's very hard to imagine going to school and not playing sports. And I loved that I was in a private school for the longest time. I went to a Catholic university as well. The transition period where I was outside of a Catholic education was 9th through 12th for high school. And that was only just due to proximity issues. So where I grew up, the nearest Catholic schools were probably about 45 minutes away, a little bit longer, which with my brother and I playing multiple sports, and both of us, some of the sports weren't overlapping. So we both played football, both played basketball, but he played volleyball. So we had different sports times and schedules as well. With two working parents, it just really wasn't feasible to be able to continue. So that's kind of how it all started for me. Like I said, it was just a very natural transition just by proxy of, how I was raised at the school that I went to, and just fell in love with sports ever since.
Yeah.
I love that. That's great and a great upbringing. Obviously, testament to your parents. Us being parents ourselves, we're starting to like, of a 5 and 3 year old now. Yeah, we're starting to see, the importance of modeling. Keeping the family
Starting to
together and
realize how
bringing them.
terrible I am.
Hmm.
Kind of shows you who you are. But yes, we obviously want to lead them in the right direction. So that's great. Your upbringing kind of aligned with what you loved. Naturally, your faith in sports. Um, so that's awesome. So was gonna ask, when you were doing all of that, how did things look like on the weekends? I mean, were you in like travel ball, sports tournaments? I mean, how did that look like, intersecting the two when you were actually playing and everything?
So it was difficult to manage, but you never really knew that. Like you only look back retrospectively and say, like, man, I can't believe that my parents were able to manage all that for me. Especially because like my brother and I like playing like AAU basketball and going to like camps, and then football was like a full year job because it's not just, in the fall football season, but you're lifting throughout the entirety of the year. And, you got baseball practice and you have open gyms for basketball. So the weekends were packed. There was a lot of travel. Sometimes we did like the split parenting thing where mom would take me, dad would take my brother because we're 2 years apart. So old enough where there are some benefits, but further apart enough where we're not playing on the same age bracket for certain
Yeah.
teams, so it's like inconveniencing. But the one thing, like, my parents being exceptionally faith-based is like we never missed church ever. That was complete non-negotiable. And then I also went throughout the week at school as well. So like, the faith and sports being blended from a young age was like very, very easy. That was like logistically probably the least difficult thing to work around,
Oh,
ironically, because I know that for some people it's hard. Like for me right now, I have a very big open group session that I run. Because I have like essentially two like paradigms of training where it's like private sessions where it's like 4 to 5 kids or less. And then I have open group sessions where there's no scheduling involved. It's just this is the time slot. You can come wherever.
mhm.
So one of those is on a Sunday morning. And it's tough because I know that people, sometimes go to church and they have like, religious I guess,
Obligations and
Yeah.
obligations to go to,
mhm.
sure.
Yep.
But it's hard because you can never find that perfect time to fit everybody.
Mm.
So even navigating it as an adult is sometimes tough too, just because you want to be able to make everything feasible and everything easily accessible. But that's very, very difficult nowadays.
Yeah.
So for me, like I said, it
Yeah.
wasn't bad, but that's also coming from a child's perspective, not from my parents'
Yeah.
perspective, since they were the ones running us everywhere.
Yeah.
Maybe if you ask my mom and dad, they'd say, yeah, it was a nightmare to do.
That's so funny. Like, side note, like, I remember getting like picked up, dropped off to like little league practice
You
for
don't.
you don't like think about, oh, they have to like leave
No.
work. You're just like, I got practice at 11. Dad'll be here,
They
kind
figure it
of
Yep.
thing.
out.
So you don't think
I
Yeah.
about it.
remember, cool story. I was the very first kid of all my friends to have a cell phone. And I got a cell phone in sixth grade, I believe. And it
Wow.
was one of those flip phone phones, like obviously no color, just like I don't know, remember if I think it was like a Verizon flip phone. It was all black. It was an LG. And the only reason, like it had no texting, it had prepaid minutes. I had like, I don't know, like 20 minutes a month, something like ridiculously small. But my parents got it for me, and the only like it wasn't like in my possession all the time because like I didn't really need a phone, and I mean phones obviously back then aren't what they are now. But
Right.
the reason that my parents bought it for me was simply because they wanted me to have something to contact them because of practice. So like if practice got out early or if practice times were changed, I would have a cell phone at my disposal to be able to say like, "Hey, mom, we're ending practice a half hour early. Could you come and get me early or whatever?" So
You don't have
they
to
they
run
did a
to a
good job
friend's
of
house.
trying to manage it.
Yeah, back then they just had
Ride
the
your
good old fashioned phone chain.
ride
You
your
call
bike up the
you call some
street, call from your friend's
Yeah.
mom.
Yeah, that's wild.
That's awesome. Um,
I was curious too in that whole time frame because and again, I think things are different now because there's more opportunities to train and be a part of more organizations, but because I didn't grow up like we didn't have practice on Sundays or things like that, you know what I
Mhm.
mean? But I'm just curious, like maybe it wasn't when you were in school, but maybe do you see kids now like you said with you, it was a non-negotiable. Your parents were getting you to church, but I wonder how many kids sometimes have to miss out on the opportunity to train or have to miss a practice or have to miss something because that church comes first and they're there, and if then they have that resentment towards church because they're missing out on practice.
That
Does that make
resentment's
sense? Like,
big. I can relate to that.
yeah, because you
Yes.
feel like, I wanna get better, everyone's getting better, and I have to be at church. But that's when
Yeah,
you should be, you know?
I mean, in the conversations that I've had in like, being fully transparent, you don't know because you don't talk to everybody, but like it seems as though I don't really know if that's as big of an issue for some people, just because I think it seems to be this like more of a non-traditional approach to church nowadays versus what it was. And I can only speak in particular to my family and to my
Yeah.
experience, but like where it was like very dogmatic. Like every Sunday we go to church, like I
Mhm.
was an altar boy, like it's very, very regimented and routine. Whereas nowadays, I think that people look at church potentially a lot more openly and like fluidly. And I think there is some benefit to come to that because you don't get so dogmatic about practices and more about like your relationship with God and what your faith means to you personally. But I think that sometimes you can fringe on potentially losing a little bit of your faith base because of like neglecting it in a sense.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that that plays a role for some families because anytime like you said, the resentment is a really big piece of it for anything for that matter. That's why like even in sports, like, I implore my parents, listen, like in a trading scenario, I'm very upfront and open sometimes to a fault where I'll tell a parent like, hey, your kid he's not really or she's not really ready for this right now because their heart's not in this. And
Mhm.
I always tell people that one of the foundations of my trading, for example, is constantly trying to make it as fun and as enjoyable as possible. So trying to take the meathead side of me and remove that and focus on making things enjoyable because what you could do is ultimately you can ruin the training experience for them, not just for me, but forever. So like if they have this
Yeah.
resentment toward training, they're not going to want to come. They're not going to want to train with their sports teams. They're not going to do anything of that. So I think that the resentment towards like your spirit can definitely play a big role for sure. I
Yeah.
just don't know how much of a role that plays right now with a
In
lot of people.
today's, because yeah,
Yeah.
there are people that will go to church on Saturday night or they go to church on Wednesday, they
Mhm.
can kind of
Yes, Saturday or yeah,
Right.
Saturday, Sunday. I just know there's a lot more sports and weekend tournaments, games starting at like 10 a.m. on Sunday and stuff. And that just obviously makes it hard. And then you have the pressure too from teammates, that maybe aren't going to church. If you're travel ball, for example, you kind of have like that weird pressure of like wanting to hang out with the team at the hotel, but needing to go to church with your parents kind of thing. And it can I don't know. I can just see different resentment here and there.
Well, and it's hard because like sports have created this like complete monopoly on kids too.
Yeah.
Not just like sports in the general sense, but a specific sport. Like when I was a kid growing up, and I'm sure you guys were much the same way, is there was like this very distinct transition into the next season. So as soon as football season was over, towards the end of it, you're like, oh, thank God, what a long season. I'm ready for basketball to start. And then
Mhm.
as soon as basketball was over, it's like, okay, thank God that was a long season. Let's get to baseball or track or whatever. Whereas now, the skill gaps are going to become so big if you're not working year round for sports. And a lot of coaches at these travel ball organizations or AAU clubs or whatever, they're so like hyper focused on improvement and being the best, which understandably so.
You want to
But then
be.
they try to create a monopoly on the athletes. So like, if you're a volleyball player and you just play during volleyball season, you're going to be behind the eight ball because some of these
Yeah.
girls are playing like JOs year round. So then it becomes this like internal struggle for the kid, not just to worry about like family and spiritual obligations, but like, how do I even break this down from sports? Because I love baseball, I love basketball, I love football, but like all three of these are vying for my time. So then it puts
Yeah.
parents in a difficult situation or scenario because they're like, well, shoot, like I don't want to specialize my kid too early, but like these kids that are specializing early are better than my son or my daughter. So where do I put him? And it just becomes like this constant like paralysis by analysis where parents are constantly probably overthinking how to spend their time, how to spend their
Yeah.
money. And it gets difficult for sure.
I can see that. And I know Aaron experienced that for sure, coaching high school
You read
basketball.
my mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a lot of it was wild to me to see how many kids, like you said, specialize so early, but I found some of my best athletes were the multi-sport athletes. We had a girl that I coached that played volleyball at Kansas, so she was recruited at a very high level. Um, and so she didn't play basketball for a few years, but we got her to play. um,
Mhm.
but I'm just saying, like, you see a lot of I don't know, I feel like we watch, like transitioning for a second because it's the same point that I wanted to make, but from a different story is even we watched on Prime, remember like the greatest athletes where it was like Wayne Gretzky and Jerry Rice, and they all talked about playing in the backyard, making it fun. There were
Mm.
no rules. It wasn't so strict all the time. There was a place for that, but just about how they played the multiple sports and worked different muscles and got like, you know what I mean, agility in different movements because you're doing different movements in different sports or utilizing different things. And I remember what stuck out to me was Wayne Gretzky saying like, hey, at the end of whatever month it was, he's like, I threw my hockey stuff in the basement and it was baseball season and I just did baseball. And this is one of the
Yeah.
greatest hockey players of all time, but he didn't specialize in hockey, you know?
And
So
I
I
think that
think
like, sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say, so I feel like sometimes it's just kind of it's hard to portray that because I
The
feel like what you're
unstructured.
saying is true. I feel like people do have that fear that if I don't specialize, I'm gonna fall behind. But would you say, do you think that you see athletes maybe that's not the case as long as they're training and they're active in a sport, they can still kind
I
of
s-
Yeah,
sorry.
I definitely have there's not like this tangible or
yeah,
quantifiable or measurable like point where it's like at this age or this specific skill level a kid should specialize, but
right.
it's definitely like two levels of it where
Yeah,
I've experienced it long enough with, thousands of kids over the years where you see that typically the ones that specialize early have success early,
yeah,
especially in like skill dominant sports. So like baseball, where like athleticism helps, but it doesn't matter how athletic you are if you don't have the specific skills. Or like
right,
basketball, like, yeah, you could be a great athlete, but if you can't dribble, you can't shoot, then you're
right.
not going to be like a great basketball player. Is these kids will like be ahead of the eight ball early
Got it.
because they specialize in basketball. So they get those skills at an earlier age, which then freaks parents out like, oh, my fourth grader can't dribble really well. And some of his other teammates who play year round can. So
Yeah.
maybe I need to specialize in basketball. But then what happens is like that progression kind of slows a little bit. And you almost, I don't want to say you mitigate an athlete's progress, but the holistic development of the athletes, because each sport like will give you specific skills that will transition and benefit you in other sports. So it's like if you specialize early, you have success early, but the ones that play multiple sports then into their teenage years and later
Yeah.
teenage
Okay.
years typically tend to like supersede that. So realistically, what you have to ask yourself is like, am I willing to play the long game with my kid and commit to, yeah, they may not be the best fourth grade basketball player, but like, is that really your goal is to
Just
dominate little league or do you want to
yeah.
get your
Some
kid to
some
develop
people, yes,
as far as they
probably.
can?
Yes.
Yeah.
No. No, that's so true. Yeah, that like holistic approach is good. And I just remember like, for example, there's that whole thing of like, great wrestlers make good better football players, or like if you want to be a better football player, then wrestling's good for you.
Mhm.
Stuff like that. And that was my story. I feel like it helped me football. I mean, balance, hip movement, tackling for sure. Um and all that. So it's just one example there. But
Did I take us too far off a
well,
tangent?
I kind of
Sorry.
want to talk about Jesus a
Yeah, let's
little
talk.
bit.
Yeah, for sure,
Maybe
100%.
maybe we should bring him on the podcast with us.
You should specialize in Jesus as early as possible,
Yeah, specialize in Jesus.
but holistically. Don't just memorize verses. You know what
Yep.
I'm
Yes.
saying?
Yes.
See? Yep, all that.
See,
Yeah,
it intertwines.
full circle. Yeah. Great rebound there. So,
Thank you. Thank you.
so want to get into your work, obviously, with No Excuse Nation, maybe your story. So obviously a great upbringing in faith and sports. And maybe do you want to talk about any decision making you had to do where No Excuse Nation came from, your desire to train, and like your reliance on like Jesus and God to begin that? I mean, did you feel like a big call from God,
Out on faith.
or felt too natural and just God was with you? Any big decisions there you had to make before starting that post your
You
athletic
know
career?
what? So like when I look at like the transition and how it happens, like you grew up playing sports and it was pretty much like your life. Like I wasn't necessarily obsessed with it, but it was just like the identity.
Yeah.
It's like the movie like Friday Night Lights where like Booby
Mhm.
Miles blows out his knee and he's crying in the car with his uncle and says like I don't know what else to do but play football. Like this is all I know.
Yeah.
And it's not like that I had like any mental breakdowns, but like when you get to college and you realize what's required from a workload perspective and you have to hang things up, then you have this like almost like this identity crisis.
Mhm.
And I went through this identity crisis personally when I quit, where it was like, okay, well, now who am I? Do you know what I mean? Like if I'm not a football player And I'm no longer from high school, like a basketball player, whatever. It's like, who am I and what do I do? So what I tried to do is I tried to like navigate life, like almost like soul searching in a sense, like as ridiculous as that sounds, just because like you're so used to putting all this time and this effort and your fortitude into like certain things. And now there's certain things aren't there. So you need to reallocate it. So it's like, where do I reallocate this to?
Mhm.
So I did powerlifting, I did Brazilian jiu-jitsu and fought for a little bit. Um, Ultimately I ended up like stumbling upon bodybuilding and competed a lot there. But when I transitioned, I felt like there was always this calling for me. Cause you know, like people say these cliche things about like, oh, well, I was called to help people, or I was called like I like changing people's lives. And I don't think that's anything like specific to one person. Like I think we all like just naturally have this like inclination to want to help people. I think that if I could get more myopic and very focused with it, mine was more like I love solving problems. And I felt like God called me to be a problem solver.
Mm.
So when like I look at like the training aspect, like bodybuilding was like a very natural transition because it's like, okay, my chest isn't big enough. How can I solve this problem? And it was something that was in my control because like growing up, I never did sports that were individual. So like I never wrestled or anything like that. It was always team sports. Well, not there was times when I let the team down, or there was times when the team had let me down, right? Where you know, you don't make a winning tackle like you should have, or you miss the free throw or whatever it is, or you strike out. So like for me, I didn't have like any independence to be able to solve problems. Whereas like with bodybuilding, it was like everything was in my locus of control. Like if I didn't like the way I look, I could change that with my nutrition and hard work. And to a large degree, like obviously genetic variables play a role in everything, but I felt like there was this very simple equation, like an algorithm where like what I put in equals what I get out. So like naturally I gravitated towards that. And then like I alluded to before we started the podcast where we are just talking like conversationally, like people would look at me and say like, hey, I want to look like that guy. Could you help me? And then for me, it's like, heck yes, I can help you. It's what I love doing. Like, I want to help people. Like, I feel like I've been called spiritually to help people and to guide people and to lead people. So then when I got, you know, out of college, again, it was just like so like this foregone conclusion that that's what I was going to do with the rest of my life is do something where I could help people and solve problems doing it just because I feel like maybe looking at the athletic side of things, like maybe there was missed opportunities with me where I didn't have a coach, you know, that guided me the way that I guided my football players when I coached high school football, or I didn't have a strength and conditioning coach that was as hands-on as I want to be. And so that was kind of like one of the foundational pillars that I founded like No Excuse Nation on, is I always tell parents, like, I want to be the trainer for your kid that I wish I would have had when I was a teenager or a middle schooler or an elementary athlete or whatever. So it was like this calling to like be a leader predominantly through making sure that I solve people's problems, just because there's like that gratification that comes along with it too.
I love
Yeah.
it. And not buying excuses, if I had to guess. So
Yes.
Not one time, not one
Nope.
purchase of an
Never.
excuse. Never ever. I like that too, because I think that's great that you did that, especially for being that person for kids. Because when I grew up playing sports, I sometimes look back. Obviously, we can't go back in time, but I feel like there was some like missed opportunities for myself, I guess. You know what I mean? Like I feel like you only have like
Always.
coaching to that ability, and I feel like, man, if I would have maybe had a different, not a different coach altogether, but like an additional coach or somebody that like maybe pushed me a little bit further, that what could have happened, right? We never know. I
Yeah.
mean,
And
I
I think that
probably
part
would
of
have been in
it's
the WNBA, but
it's like part of it's predicated on specificity too. So
Mhm.
like when we were growing up, like I don't remember there being like a me. Like your only
Right.
trainers were just like people at the local YMCA that just work with like general population clients. There weren't like athlete specific trainers as much.
Mhm.
Um, you know, and so a lot of it you're relying on, you know, your head football coach to put together your workout, which was a workout that he was doing 20 years ago when he played. So there's probably like a lot of missed gaps and
Yeah.
things weren't probably done um in the most, I don't know, efficient way possible. But certainly one of the things that you could take away is that there's definitely hard work, you know, because that was obviously something that was preached, but it was maybe it wasn't directed in the best avenue. It was just like hard work and doing difficult things for long periods of time. And ultimately that may manifest in progress, hopefully.
Yeah. Yeah.
for sure. Love that. So great breakdown. And I want to get to where faith plays a part in No Excuse Nation in your training regimen, you know, Christian principles, right? Because obviously you're not probably with the Bible, reading scripture while you're telling athletes to, run this pro agility drill or whatever, right? So,
Maybe
how
he is.
maybe you are, maybe you should start. um, but yeah, how does maybe faith and Christian principles play a part in what you currently do? And so we'll start there, I guess.
I think succinctly, for me, it all boils down just like to authenticity and leadership. So when I get this like really big role and my trading business just like exploded to the point where it started just for like some side cash and then just like overflowed to the point where like it's this full blown career for me. Um, well, like as it grew, publicity grows. And as publicity grows, there's more responsibility. It's like my father always said, to whom much is given, much is expected.
Mhm.
So there was that personal, like almost like a little bit of like a weight or like, like a cross that you had to bear where it's like, I need to make sure that I conduct myself a certain way at all times because there's constant eyes on me. So you become like this prominent figure in the area. And I say that like humbly, not like, I'm some like
Sure.
mega superstar, but you have a role in the community where everybody knows who you are. So therefore leadership becomes a part of that. And, leading my Christian values is like such a necessity, even in the context of like if you have an athlete that's a non-believer, like spiritual spiritual items aside, there should be no specific denomination that like doesn't require you to be a good person.
Mhm.
Do you know what I mean? So like I was constantly like, I don't know, just thinking about how I conduct myself and what my leadership looks like. And I tried to like holistically look at the athlete beyond the weight room. So I think that's one of the things that helped me establish such a big client load is like being so hands-on with them all the time. So, I told you guys like I'm constantly connected to my phone. A lot of it's scheduling and logistical and clerical things and administrative tasks, but a lot of it is also just communication with my kids. Like every day, outside of training, I'll probably talk to at least 50 kids, like
Wow.
checking in on their grades. If I hear about like they were at a party doing this, then like I have no problems taking them aside after training and say, like, dude, what are you doing? Like, you
Mhm.
know better than this. This is not how we want to conduct ourselves. Or even if you go like the younger grades, like it's some of my elementary athletes where I hear that like there's a bullying issue that like so and so is causing, and I need to address it to them and say, like, how would you feel if someone did this to you? And play like that father figure
Mhm.
role. I just think about like, the leadership and how I conduct myself and then making sure I approach the athletes holistically and don't just look at like how much can they bench press and how fast can we make them, but how do they perform outside of here? Not just in the literal sense of like sports performance, but like how do they conduct themselves? Because ultimately I think that's also a reflection on me because like you guys would be amazed at the number of people that like come up to me in the community that say, hey, one of your athletes was at this party or one of your kids was, at Bob Evans acted like a fool. And so like then I have to address those things because whether you like it or not, those kids are synonymous with me and we're tied at the hip, which has helped from a branding perspective and a marketing perspective. And I love that like the kids will wear my clothes and like put
Mhm.
me in their Instagram bio and like they're very proud that I train them, but there's also some responsibility that comes with that. Like, hey, if you're gonna wear No Excuse Nation, then we can't have excuses for poor behavior.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, that's cool, and it's awesome you're bringing that up because obviously you've transitioned, into coaching rather, than playing now, minus any rec ball leagues you might be in. You play any rec ball on the side?
I try to play
No?
pickup when I can. It's just
Pickup?
the time is so
Okay.
difficult. My
Yeah,
trading
probably.
partners at the gym who are not basketball players are trying to get us to join a men's league soon. So that's hopefully on the docket for
We
next
need
Same.
year.
another player.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, we'll see. I wanna keep both my hammies, intact through the holidays, so,
Okay.
but anyways, yeah, what I was gonna say is that perspective that people have of coaches because I remember, I don't it's not an exact saying, but it goes something along the lines of, like, athletes or players take or, like, play with the personality traits that their head coach has. I don't know if
Sure.
you've seen that or, heard that in some sense, but I understand that a lot, with, my coaches growing up. Like, you play the game and it like, your coach's personality kinda morphs into the players, so I can kinda see people attributing that to you being a coach now, even though you're not the basketball coach, head football coach,
Right.
wrestling, whatever it is. You're still a coach in some sense. So I can see them coming to you. I
Yeah.
can see how the community would view you as, that. I don't want to say end all be all, but person of influence for them. So,
Well, and
so
it's
that's really
definitely like you can see me in my athletes, and that's something that makes me really proud. Because like one of the things that I'm really big on is barefoot. So like I train bare feet like constantly, like no socks on,
Ooh.
like in the gym setting
you
on the
do.
turf. Oh yeah, like I mow my lawn in bare feet. I go for
Wha-
walk my dog in my bare feet. Like I never
Whoa,
have shoes on. I pump my gas in bare feet.
what?
So yeah, it started as like an orthopedic thing because like I have like flat feet. So
Yeah,
my arches and my feet like pronate in. Well, that fascial tissue and some of the supports in your feet are actually like muscles that can be like hypertrophied just like any other muscle. So you can actually grow them into arches. And like typical, traditional footwear is terrible for your foot. So I train in bare feet all the time. Plus, you get like the grounding benefits of the like electron exchange and all that hippie stuff if you want to get into
yeah,
that.
I'm
But the
into
long
it.
and short of it is, I definitely like never have shoes on. And now it's funny because people make these jokes at like the gym that like my trading company isn't like a company, it's a cult because like all the kids will have bare feet on and the parents will text me like, oh, like my kids are constantly walking around outside and inside barefoot, like they refuse to put socks and shoes on. So I definitely think that there's some nuance that comes along with like being a good role model. So then again, going back to the quote that my dad always says about whom much is given, much is
Yeah.
expected. There's like that expectation that like I have to watch what I do because people will call me out on it. Like even if I go to eat fast food, like somebody will say, "Hey, I saw you eating McDonald's. What the heck were you doing? Why wouldn't you do that?" So there is a nice accountability layer that comes with it too. Like I actually appreciate that people call me out on that stuff. Or like, if somebody drives by the gym on like a Tuesday and like, hey, like, I was out late and I drove by the gym early this morning at 4 a.m. and your car wasn't there. Did you sleep in? What were you doing? So like the whole
Yeah.
community helps hold me accountable, which is nice because then you're a little bit self-aware because I think it's very easy, like regardless of what your faith is or how strong it is, there's always times of lapse or like judgment.
Mhm.
Like we were talking beforehand about energy drinks. It's like, you know that maybe the energy drink isn't the greatest thing for you, but sometimes you have not necessarily a lapse in judgment, but like, oh, this tastes really good. I still want to do this.
No,
So
it's a
like
lapse of
you
judgment.
and I am for sure like the
It is.
first one to say that like my behavior is not always exemplary. And there's times like one of my biggest struggles, like the demons that I face are like anger issues where it's ironic because people might tell you that I have zero patience, but it's this odd paradox where it's literally the exact opposite. Like the manifestation of my patience is what makes me look like I don't have any because I'll let things kind of build for a little bit
Mm.
and then just explode. So it looks like, oh man, that guy just blew up over something little. He has no patience. But ironically, it's like the exact opposite. So some of like my anger management stuff is something that I definitely needed to work on. So you definitely have like those lapses in judgment with how you conduct yourself publicly. But I try to find this unique blend about like not caring what people think because I think that's important. But at the same time, like leadership is a very big responsibility and it's not easy and there's constantly eyes on you. So like even what I post on social media, like there's like I kind of have to be self-aware of like if I post a reel that I make, like making sure that the music in the background, what does it say? What kind of message is it sending? So again, I'm not always the greatest example, but I try to be cognizant of it just because the fact that you have so many eyes on you and people like you alluded to, Ryan, people are going to follow you. So you need to make sure that, you're guiding them in the right way. People, they'll say like, I'm like the Pied Piper or like Mother Goose with all everybody following me. So that's just part of the cult, I guess.
Part of the call. Well, I'm gonna start training without shoes on and see what happens. I'm sure they'll kick me
You'll love
right
it.
out of Orange Theory, um, but what I like too, I think tying in what you were saying as well, I like when you started off in the beginning, we were talking about how you're trying to look at a kid as a holistic person, not how much they can lift, not how fast they are, not how right where they are, but who they are as a person. And I think that ties in beautifully with what you were just talking about, as well as seeing that they're human beings. So they're not always going to perform to their greatest ability at all times, even though that's what we're pushing for, and we're setting that standard for them, right? But to understand that they're humans and seeing them for who they are as people, because I think what I love so much about sports and faith as a young person is I feel like that really just sets you up for life for any challenge that comes your way.
Yes.
No excuse nation. These kids are going to grow up having no excuses, and they're going to learn how to overcome certain things. But going back to what you put that whole point is, and that was a big focus of mine whenever I was coaching kids, is it was like none of these I shouldn't say none, you never know, but I'm like, the majority of these people that I'm coaching are not going to go to the WNBA. Like, they're not gonna
Mhm.
be playing basketball for their whole life, but they are gonna be human beings that maybe get married, have families, work in a career, are an active participant of their community. So I wanna make sure that that leadership that I portray is exemplary for what I want to see in my fellow citizens as I get older, and
Mhm.
just kind of doing that. So I think that's what I like. I like that you can really push these kids and really get them to train, hold them accountable, and help grow them the nitty-gritty of what they want to accomplish in their sports career, but also how that portrays into life, how
When
that's
I think one of the biggest things for me too was the fact that like I struggle with a lot of mental health stuff growing up. And like that's like, a whole nother day, a whole nother episode, just because it's like such this like largely integrated story, but just like also at the same time separate from its own, where so like being a huge mental health advocate, like I've really been able to connect with the kids because I feel like sometimes I'm more of a therapist than a trainer.
Mhm.
Because I mean, there's been times when like I've had to like forego like a training session because like, this girl comes in who just broke up with her boyfriend and she's in tears. So now we need to spend the next hour not doing our lateral movement. We need to spend the next hour, being a therapist more or less and
Yeah.
talking through some things. And one of the things that's always given me like great comfort is just knowing that like, regardless of like how dark my life may have been internally at some point, God has always gotten me through it. And that's like, it sounds so simple, but it's really profound to think that like, no matter like what you've gone through in your life, like no matter what trauma you've experienced, you've gotten through every single thing that you never thought you would get through. Okay. Like we've all had like a multitude of instances where you're like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to get through this, or this is going to kill me, or, whatever it is. But like you've gotten through every single obstacle that you've been confronted with in your entire life. So for me, that's 36 years of being on this earth, over 3 decades of being on planet Earth. And I've gotten through every insurmountable experience that I thought I would never get through. So, like, you could use that ideology and kind of show it to the kids and say, listen, like, everything that you've gone through, now maybe it's only been 15 years, but all of your life experiences, God's gotten you through that. And you'll continue to get through that. There's nothing that you haven't been able to overcome, and that trend will continue for the rest of your life. So I think that like that's something that's gotten me through a lot is just knowing that like it sounds like again, going back to like the meathead side of things, it's like, oh, you can overcome and you can smash any obstacle. But like the reality is that's exactly it. It is honestly that simple. If you break it down, it may be uncomfortable for lack of a better term for a long period of time, but you're going to be able to get through any obstacle that you've been faced with because you have the history of showing that that's been the case for 36 years of your life.
That's perfect and super well said. Yes. It's just like if, you think of what was a problem 5 years ago in your life, you would look back on it and be like,
Not a
eh, whatever. Like it doesn't seem
Yeah.
like that big of a deal anymore. So think 5 years from now, whatever you're going through, what you're going to think of the situation today you're going through. You're just going to be like, oh, whatever, so that's,
Yep.
another
Yeah.
way to look. So,
And I think
um,
nailing it too is saying like God's got you. He's got you through. He always has. He always will. Because as athletes, we are so focused on what we control, what we can do, what we show up, and we
Yes.
continue to do those things. But you have to trust that God's going to do His part and pull you through as well.
you know it. So, um, down to maybe the different, the Christian athlete side of things here. You have obviously a unique perspective of being a a Christian athlete yourself and now a Christian coach and everything. Any similarities, differences between bringing Jesus into sports when you were playing and Jesus in sports now with athletes? I mean, do you want to maybe compare and contrast? Do you feel like Jesus is making his way more into sports, from your perspective? What do you think there?
Yeah, I think there's like been like this pendulum or this like paradigm shift that's gone on, where it ebbs and flows like societally, where I think that everything comes at the perfect time when it's needed. So like, when I was growing up, again, looking at it in a small lens, like I was at a Catholic school. So like obviously that was a big part of it. Like we would have our basketball games like when I was in elementary school and middle school on Saturdays and Sundays. And so like the team would go to church before the game. And we were playing other Catholic schools. So they were going to church and then, we'd go to church and then travel to wherever and play our game. And that was that. So like it was obviously a big part of my everyday life. in sports. Like we would pray after practice and stuff. And then when you get to the public setting, like we still said the Lord's Prayer before all of our football games, but it was kind of like an interpersonal thing. Like you could pray before the game separately if you wanted, or like a group of us would get together and pray on the sidelines. Like a few of my linemen specifically that I remember, like we would gather probably about 5 of us like right before kickoff and pray. I actually have like pictures from like high school
Cool.
football where we'd be like the 5 of us would be huddled up praying before the game.
Oh,
Now I feel like, and then there's a time where there was like this big push for separation of like, God and the state and everything.
yeah.
But I just feel like now, because we constantly say how society's changing, and there are definitely some negatives to the way society's changed. But one of the things that seems like it's helping is just the acceptance of everything, in the sense that like people aren't afraid to talk about it if someone doesn't believe in it. So like I felt like there was a period of time where like if you believe in God and you want to go share that with someone, that person may not be receptive to that message. And then there's that uncomfortable like, well, I don't believe in this. Whereas now it seems like everybody has like their own little belief system, but they're much more accepting and willing to hear like other arguments, and not necessarily arguments, but hear other perspectives. Like for me, like there's nothing I love more than having conversations with like someone who is a non-believer or people of other denominations or religious sects, just because like it makes me so much more open-minded. And you look and realize that like while there are such like dogmatic differences, we're all very, very similar in the same context of like most non-radical religions preach the same things, like how you conduct yourself, like love your neighbor, be a giving person, like all the core values that you think are innate in most people.
Hmm.
So I feel like now like athletes talk about it all the time. Like I mentioned it before when we were talking off camera, how like social media is being a big part of that, because like people constantly post Bible verses. So I think it's like, I don't want to say there was a time period where it wasn't widely accepted, but like what's mine is mine and what's yours is yours. And beliefs kind of played into that. Like my belief system is my belief system. Whereas now it seems like kids are just better communicators and don't mind sharing that stuff. And like I
Yeah.
even told you that I have some athletes that have like Catholic or Christian podcasts that they do, which, obviously podcasts weren't really big back when we were kids, but like that's a massive step in the right direction of people just being comfortable with who they are and wanting to share that,
Yeah.
whether it's like, religious context or not.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love how you brought all that up, and everything. And yeah, obviously technology, podcasting, hey, what we're doing here, obviously can
Yeah.
bring the message. I always like to think like, what would St. Paul and St. Peter do if they had the internet and
Mhm.
a podcast? Like they would be nonstop,
Oh gosh, yeah.
on this 24/7. But wanted to ask how you obviously don't name names, anything like that, but like over your career, even on an annual basis with over 300 athletes, that you work with every year, um, how do you maybe see, if you do notice any Christian athletes, how do you see their faith play a part in their training? I mean, are there a few that stick out to you of like, I can tell he's a Christian, or like he, or she is extra motivated or overcame this obstacle and they testified to their faith? I mean, anyone stick out to you there on how you've seen their faith improve or help performance in
For
any ways?
sure. And I don't know exactly how this is correlated, whether it's like what came first, the chicken or the egg. But there's definitely like, demographically speaking, the ones that like are very faith-based overall tend to be so much more positive and enthusiastic when it comes to training. Now, that's not to say like most of my kids that come want to be there. So
Hmm.
I typically don't ever have issues with buy-in. I don't typically have issues with work ethic, just because like you eliminate that by having conversations with parents. And then, very few times have I had to do this, but there have been times when you're working with thousands that there are going to be some that you need to cut loose and say, hey,
Yeah.
this isn't really working out. I think you guys need to go elsewhere for whatever reason. So I usually don't have issues with people being enthusiastic or having energy or loving training, but it just seems like the faith-based ones are so much more geared towards that. And again, when you work with so many athletes, you have a big enough sample size to see that that's not coincidence.
Yeah.
So the reason I bring up, I'm not sure how it's correlated, is because maybe that's just the family value of things. Like you have a family that raises you in a structure of like, a Christian upbringing where work ethic, more kind of like how I was brought up.
Mhm.
Like maybe that is just a part of what is ingrained in them from a young kid. So maybe they're not actively thinking like, man, this training session really sucks, but God's going to pull me through. Maybe it's just the point where it's so second nature to them just because of their upbringing. Like I have some kids, like one in particular who played, and I will name his name because he won't mind. His name's Liam. He played football at Pittsburgh Central Catholic, and he went and started offensive line for the University of San Diego. So he's 3,000 miles across the country.
Wow.
After his freshman year, transfers back over into home in PA and went to Penn. And now he's in grad school at UNC. And Liam, one of the most enthusiastic kids that I've ever worked with, and now as an adult, I would consider a friend. And he used to spend his summers going on like missionary trips where he would go to like Jamaica and build like schools and buildings and stuff. So you see that there just seems to be like almost like that. And I don't want to detract from any other kid,
Yeah.
but there just seems to be like a little bit better quality of life, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. Like a little bit more of like an enthusiasm or a shine to them. Like the ones in particular that like run this podcast, like Landon, I believe is the one that's ahead of it. He's like one of my high jumpers. He actually had the highest high jump in the state last year. Now he didn't get that highest high jump at the state finals. So he
Oh,
didn't win states, but he had the highest high jump in the state last year for his division. He was only a
wow.
sophomore. Just a shameless plug for him there.
Yeah,
Well,
Yeah,
anyway, he
definitely
has
is.
like
go Landon.
he has this like faith-based podcast that he does much like yours.
Cool.
And he posts videos on YouTube all the time. And again, he's another kid that just has like this innate like enthusiasm and brightness about him where he's constantly in a good mood. So like whether it's directly correlated to thinking actively about like their religious convictions when they're training or whatever, or maybe it's just a product of being brought up in that type of an environment, there's certainly a correlation. Like I said, you can see it when you have a big enough sample size that's not
Yeah.
coincidence when you see it over and over and over again for over 10 years.
Yeah. I
It's the
love
Holy Spirit.
that is the Holy Spirit, and I love how you say, yeah, it's not a coincidence, and I know exactly what you're talking about of someone having that, extra light to them, extra little joy or, I don't wanna say their energy, is better, more positive in a way. It's just more that Holy Spirit, right? Kinda shining through them, and when you were talking about, a Bible verse that came up when you were talking about all that, the kids just seem a little bit more happier, is when St. Paul talks about, remaining joyful in amidst suffering. So I think something like that would obviously apply to someone when you can barely breathe after you get done with
Yeah.
a training session, right? And still remaining joyful, positive, do a little break or team break afterwards. I think that's really cool. And I love how you say I don't think it's a coincidence because neither do we.
And you see enough. Yeah.
When you see enough
I
of that.
think too, like there's something, and again, I can't prove this, and there's no way to know for sure. But I do think that that comes from a perspective sense that if you don't have this belief and you don't believe Jesus Christ died for your sins and you have this eternal salvation
You have
and
hope.
you have this thing, you do have hope. But I do think that going back to what we said, we can put a lot of pressure on ourselves and it's all about me, me, me. And so when you do slip and you do fall, you take it so hard and maybe you don't have that joy and that glimmer, right? Or bounce back. Again, I can't prove any of this, but I'm just saying my perspective. It just sounds like those who do have faith and maybe practice their faith and do have that belief in God, they realize the bigger picture that I'm going to overcome this. It's not that big of a deal. The end, we know the end, right? We always talk about if you watch your favorite team, you watch the Super Bowl and your favorite team's in it, but you didn't get to watch it. It's recorded on TV and you go back and watch it later. When you see your team miss a tackle,
You're not worried.
you're not as worried because you know the end. You know what happened in
Mhm.
the end. It already happened. So I kind of
Yes.
feel that way. At least that's how I feel like in my faith. And so I'm just alluding to maybe that
No.
could be like an innate thing that
Yeah.
believers have, maybe not consciously thinking that, but knowing like, we got this. It's
Well,
okay.
I
I
think
can bounce back.
I think that goes to show the proof in how Christianity truly transforms us, in a lot of ways and, can transform you, which it should, to be a better person, right? And follow Christ
Interesting.
and bring others to him. So that's
I
great.
What I
love
think
it.
one big thing with that too is like it teaches you when you like mentioned it, you said like bigger picture. It teaches you to have perspective.
Mhm.
Like I was just thinking about this the other day, living in Ohio and seeing like the Michigan and Ohio State game. Is like when you go on social media, is how many people let the entirety of their year, and I know, Ryan, I was told that you're a big Huskers fan.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
like you let the entirety of your year, it like almost like you identify, like maybe some people think it's silly that I identify as a gym person, or at one time like I got on stage with my underwear oiled up trying to have bigger muscles than everybody. Like maybe they thought that was weird who I identified with. But it's just like crazy how people let their entire mental state for an entire year fringe on kids playing a game
That they
that at a school they didn't go to, and they don't even know these kids. Like this has no, like, and I'm the most passionate sports fan ever. Like I love sports. Like I have like several professional sports teams that lose all the time, and it makes me lose my mind. But like I'm also able to compartmentalize it and say like, okay, that sucks. I'm going to be mad for the next half hour. And now I have to get back to like being an adult and worrying about the bigger
dude,
picture and having appropriate context.
it is so funny you say that because intellectually you know that, but it's still so hard. Like
Yes.
when it does happen, I especially when you're at home, it's the weirdest thing if you really take yourself back and if you're like God looking down on us, like you're especially yeah, if you're at home, you're looking at this box on a wall, this screen, you're just in there and there's these kids, 1,500 miles away running around on a pasture, with a ball, and you're mad they didn't cross the line with a ball enough times, and you're in your room 1,500 miles away, like yelling, and it's ruined the rest of your Saturday, right? So
It's true.
I've been there.
Perspective.
I've
And
Yeah.
I
been
think
there.
that's why faith is so important, just because
Yes.
not that like I think like when I'm watching like so, my family, like my grandparents were from Detroit. So like I'm a big Detroit sports fan. So
Mm.
like Lions losing, it hasn't been the case the last couple years, but
Yeah.
like virtually my entire life and like even the 50 years before I was born, the Lions had been synonymous with losing.
Yep.
So it's like you're not actively thinking about like, well, at least I'll get to heaven someday, even though
Yeah.
the Lions lost. Like that doesn't really factor in, but it's just the fact that like God provides a deeper perspective of life.
Yeah.
And then you can like transpose that or like extrapolate that from a faith-based practice and put it into everyday
Yeah.
context and just realize like, hey, like in the grand scheme of things, this doesn't matter. So like one of the things that I was notorious for was getting derailed by the smallest of things. So like I remember one time I was at a gym out in Pittsburgh working with a lady who I did some like virtual consultation stuff, and she would pay me a nice amount of money to travel out to her, train her, and then travel back. So it was like a couple hours of my day, which I don't really have available all the time. So I would go out and train her like, a couple times a month or whatever. While I was driving home, this was last year, I believe. Yeah, it was last year. I'm driving home. It's late at night. I haven't eaten. I'm really hungry. The weather's terrible. I hit a pothole and my tire explodes like instantly, like doesn't deflate, like literally explodes. And I'm halfway between Pittsburgh and home. I have to pull over the side of the road. It's pouring down rain. And I'm on NFL Sunday Ticket on my phone, and the Lions are getting absolutely dump trucked by the Bills. And I'm
What a
sitting in the
day.
car waiting for the tow truck to get here. And like there was almost like this weird semblance of like calm where I said, like, I was like actually proud of myself because I was like, you know what? A couple years ago, I would have tried to flip the car and walk home. I was like, but this doesn't matter. Like,
I'll carry it.
I I have resources. I have a phone where I'm able to call a tow truck company. I have money. Like I'm comfortably, financially where I can pay for these resources to get fixed. So it's like now, like little things seem to not bother me.
Mhm.
Like, at a Chipotle, this teenage girl backed into my car and smashed my bumper and scratched it all up. Well, like they wanted to pay for it. And I told them, no, you don't have to pay for it. It's all good. Like, I understand that that could happen to any teenage daughter. Yeah, it could happen to mine. Like, I don't want you to like have insurance cost increases or anything like that. I said, I'll take care of it. Like, it's not a big deal because they were like, she even said, like, we'll get it to you as soon as we can. Like, financially, I don't know if they were, they kind of made it seem like they're a little bit strapped. And I'm like, no, that's okay. Like, I have resources to be able to take care of this
Yeah.
myself. Like, I would want, and then what I was going to say to her, but then she kind of interrupted me and said that we would definitely be like, first of all, she was not willing to accept it. Well, then she saw like, I'm not going to let you give me money. So you can try whatever you want. You're not going to give it to me. Once she like realized like that I was playing hardball, then she was like, well, we're definitely going to pay it forward, which was going to be my request for her. So
Oh.
obviously that was something nice, but it's definitely like the perspective side of things. I've certainly matured in realizing that like little things don't really detract from my life as much as we sometimes make them seem. So
Yeah.
whether it's a flat tire or your sports team losing or whatever, I just try to have context and see the bigger picture, even though, like you said, Ryan, it's hard. Like, you know that. Like, you're a mature intellect and you still sometimes succumb to the feeling of like wanting to smash your TV because Jared Goff fumbled in the red zone or whatever. Like, it's hard. I know.
Weirdest. It's the weirdest thing. And Aaron tells, and like you know it, and then you get mad at yourself for knowing it, but still not doing it. And
Uh-huh.
you're like, anyways,
Listen, we got 7 minutes into the game on Saturday and
my
I
gosh,
shut it off.
Aaron shut off the
He's like, I
TV.
can't handle this. No, I'm not
I'm
doing
like,
it.
Aaron, there's like 9 minutes left in the first quarter. Ohio State was down like 6-0. I
And it
think,
was 6-0. Yeah.
yeah,
And I turned it off.
I think
like,
she even shut it off before that, like 3-0. Like it
Mm.
was like, I'm like, Aaron, come on.
But I will say too, even when it comes to like that, like you just said, like we were talking about like athletes that are on the field playing those games and big heated rivalry matches, like of course, but sometimes I feel like it's the fans that are worse
Yeah.
than the
Oh, for sure.
Mhm.
I hate going to sporting events. Like I don't know. I think like the viewership experience isn't really that good because like it's better when you're on your TV in
Yes.
like a climate control environment on your couch. But just like the way that fans act is like completely intolerable. I mean, heck, especially at youth sports, they're even worse than the pros are.
Yeah. I feel like in some sad ways, a lot of fans like that's like their life. I mean, they have work and then they have their football team. And
Mhm.
maybe they need to
It's
listen
like
to
the
an
only
episode like
excitement that they
this and
have.
listen to Charlie. So,
Yeah.
so they know there is a bigger picture out there, and so they don't have to get as wrapped up or throw beer cans at other people. I don't know. It's just some of this stuff you see is just a
Wild.
mess. But
Well, and sometimes too, like I try to like have like an empathetic route if I can, like because it's tough to relate to that. But like, like I was coaching youth football and like this was third and fourth for a year, and then fifth and sixth for a year. And I remember like making a joke about how like some of these people like this is like their life is like third and fourth grade football, like not seeing the bigger picture. Not, I mean, it's like 50% of the parents probably think their kids are going to the NFL. And it's like you look at it and you almost like have this like a little bit of like, I don't want to say sympathy, like you look down on someone because it's never the perspective that you want to take, but like you kind of put it in a vacuum and say like, oh, like this person acts like football is their whole life, but that may be the case. You know what I mean? There's some
Yeah.
people that work a job they don't like. They're in a relationship where they don't like their significant other despite living with them. There's like a lot of misery, a lot of doubt, a lot of hopelessness, a lot of poverty, whether it's like, fiscally or even like mental poverty where they're struggling. And so like that football, like watching their, 12-year-old son may be the biggest and only joy that they have. And maybe they do want to put all their eggs in that basket. So you try to like empathize a little bit if you can and realize that like as much as we can say like there's no perspective there, they don't see the bigger picture. Like maybe they just physically can't see the bigger
Yeah.
picture because A, no one showed it to them, or B, they're just not in a position where they're ready to receive the message yet.
hmm I love that, and thanks for setting me straight on that with with all that. Because yes, I'm like, come on, there's more out there than just this game.
Well,
But yes, we definitely do need to step back.
I do want to tie in too because you make a good point too, where it's like they haven't seen it yet, or they're not ready to see it, which goes back to our whole underlying like passion in life with Jesus and sports is because I feel like people can see it through sports now, right? Like they can be inspired by seeing kids pray. Like watched like some Instagram reels, and you'll see these kids that are praying in the end zone together, and it's like you're watching a game, but you can still be inspired by faith. So I just feel like when you were saying that, it was just like reiterating in my mind that I'm like, this is why I love this because people could receive the message through a fourth grade football game. You never know.
Well,
Like you
that's
can
the
be.
whole idea, obviously, of Saint Fuel, and what we want to do is, we do have that vision to, create an atmosphere really in every sport that glorifies Jesus Christ, and doing that
Could
through
see it.
empowering athletes to
When they're ready,
glorify
they'll see
Him.
it. Yeah.
So, um,
You
love
just
it.
got me all
So,
jacked up. Now I want to
yeah,
run through a brick wall because
yeah.
now I'm like,
So, you see how
Listen, we had this incident the other day in training. It was hilarious. There's like such a small like microcosm of like the big picture, but it was like such this like hilarious thing that fits perfectly in the context of what we're talking about. We were doing like some Atlas stone lifts. So like the strongmen, how they have like the concrete Atlas stones. Well, I have like some polyurethane, like rubber ones that some of the kids will use. And we have this kid, he's in 5th grade now, and he was getting ready to like PR on this Atlas stone. So it was the highest box height that he's ever lifted the stone to. And he had some older kids at the training session with him, and he's getting like himself all psyched up to lift it. And before he lifts it, he gives himself the sign of the cross and kisses and points up to the heavens. And like all the older kids looked around him and were like, heck yeah. Like it got them motivated just seeing, this 11-year-old who was so like enthusiastically like praying, like, hey, God's got me here. I'm going to put this stone
Yeah,
on this box. And
that's
like the
perfect.
morale of the room just picked up just from that. It was hilarious. And it was
I
like
love it.
perfectly like what you guys just like
That's
mentioned there.
perfect. That's exactly what is, ideal
Yes.
and what we love to see and stuff. And that's awesome. Boldly living out your faith in
Yeah.
sport.
Even
So,
at age 11,
yes.
Yep.
there's no age limit.
Yes. We do need a wrap here. And I know before we start recording, this, as you can see, you can tell how we could go forever.
I know. Like,
But,
I don't want to stop.
yeah.
Likewise.
I feel like it's
Uh,
just getting good.
Yes. Do need a wrap, but is there anything you want to go over or share, faith wise, sports wise, or maybe your final message to Christian athletes, if you did have one, that you want to share that we haven't talked about yet?
Yeah, I would say like the biggest thing, that I would implore people to do is number one, compartmentalize your life and look at the context like we talked about before. And number two is understand that leadership isn't necessarily a choice, but like, a responsibility that's bestowed upon you, whether you like it or not. And I say that in the context of there's been times, like, especially when I was like a younger trainer and didn't have this like client base, where I would have like people reach out to me and say they get really motivated by my content or by seeing my athletes or by parents like who's even now who signed their kid up for training and said, yeah, I followed you on Instagram for like a year and I really wanted to sign my kid up, but now I was just able to do it financially, or now we just have the time to be able to do it. So the message with that is that there are eyes on you all the time. And like, I remember like when I played high school football and we would come off the field and the kids, like the youth kids would be in their jerseys and they would like line like a tunnel for us to get to the locker room. And I remember like I would give them my gloves after the games and stuff. And like they would ask for autographs, which like in hindsight is hilarious.
Yeah.
But then, and I remember too, like one of our cheerleaders, her name was Annie, and she did like the pageants, like the county pageants and stuff like that. I'm not exactly sure what goes into it, but one of her responsibilities is she had to go to like schools and speak. And I remember she was in one of my study halls, I think it was my junior or senior year, and she came to study hall and was like, "Oh, you would have been so happy." Like I went to this elementary school, and gave like a speech to their kids, and I was in my cheerleader uniform because it was a Friday. She was like, and they asked me if I was a cheerleader, and I asked them like who goes to the football games, and they all raised their hand, and I asked them if they have a favorite player, and she's like, unanimously, she's like, all the kids said that you were their favorite player. And I thought that that was really cool that like these elementary kids are like going to the games and like watching me and like knowing who I am. So I try to get my kids to understand that like there are eyes on you all the time. And there are kids that like, there's people that you're their hero and you don't even know that they exist. So you have like this ethical and moral responsibility to carry out exactly how you want them to look at you. So if you're a faith-based person and you want to be known to that, that's not something, obviously, like we talked about it, there can be lapses, but this isn't a light switch that you can conveniently shut on and off. And sometimes you have that responsibility, whether you like it or not, you got to keep that light switch on. So I think just people being like more self-aware of understanding that there are obligations that they have that are bigger than they recognize just because more people have their eyes on you than you think. I think that would be like extremely important take home message for people.
That's
Agree.
perfect and extremely well said. Very well said. Yeah, it's so easy to get tied up in a almost a good way of like being humble and like, oh, not wanting the attention or people to think about you in that way. But the reality is they are, in a lot of ways,
Mhm.
especially the little kids. And, as you're an athlete, that's like the hometown hero in a lot of ways, the football players, volleyball players, when it's that season and everything. So, that's awesome. Very cool here. So, I'll say a quick prayer as we bring this in for a landing, and then we'll sign off here. So, God, thank you for this amazing day. Thank you for the gift of life. Thank you for the opportunity to live, love, grow, give, and serve our gifts for the greater good of this world. Please help us be all we were created to be. Help us be holy. Help us be saints. Thank you so much to Charlie for coming on this podcast. We ask that you bless him and his training program, No Excuse Nation. We ask that you bless him as a leader, that you can help him be the face of Jesus towards, the athletes that he trains in the community and, his family and everything. Just infuse your spirit into everything that Charlie touches and the athletes that he trains so that your face and your glory can live on and shine in this world. Amen.
Amen.
So, awesome. Well, thanks for joining, everyone. Yeah, so we got Charlie Dolnosich from No Excuse Nation. See, I got it right.
There you
That
go.
time it just took me an hour here, but Charlie Dolnosich, No Excuse Nation. Check him out, everyone. If you're local in Ohio, in the Northeast Ohio area, he runs a great performance training program. Founded on faith principles to help your student athlete out. So. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Thanks for joining, Charlie. Have a great day, everyone.